right, big news in the NFL today when Houston Texans head coach Bill O'Brien was fired after 4 games of the 2020 NFL season. And I have to admit, when I first saw this, I was a little bit surprised because Bill O'Brien's had a lot of success as the head coach of the Houston Texans. He's won four out of his last 5 AFC South titles. That includes last year going 10-4, beating the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. He's been the playoffs, 4 out of the 5 last years. He's had an overall good record. He's 9-7 his first 3 years with crappy quarterbacks, winning the division, contending for the division. He had a bad year in between where he went 4-12. That was the year that Deshaun Watson's rookie year where he tore his ACL, so they only had him for a few games. And then since Deshaun Watson has come back from the ACL injury, they've had 2 tremendous years, winning at least 10 games. Both of those years, as I mentioned, going to the playoffs last year and winning, beating the Bills, and getting up early on the Kansas City Chiefs before they roared back to win that game and end up going on to the Super Bowl. So for the future, it looked bright. They have a franchise quarterback in Deshaun Watson. And when you have a franchise quarterback, a young, talented, potentially elite quarterback in the NFL, things are looking good. But they didn't end up going good because Bill O'Brien's 0-4 this year. They struggled. And I think a big issue happens to be with the whole general manager situation. Since Bill O'Brien's there, he's had a lot of general manager woes. Rick Smith was the general manager for several years when they had, throughout some of their early success. But Bill O'Brien, even despite some of that success, seemed to butt heads with Rick Smith. Rick Smith ended up stepping down, going to spend some time with his wife who was battling cancer. And so Bill O'Brien went out and got Brian Gaine to come in from the Buffalo Bills, a guy that he had success with, that he had worked with in the past. And this was a guy that he wanted. Instead, Brian Gaine came in there and didn't even last a year before he was fired. Then the team went without a general manager for the 2019 season before Bill O'Brien took over this past offseason as the full-time general manager. Now, he wanted Nick Caserio, the Patriots' director of player personnel. Does it seem to be a guy that they've wanted for a long time? Caserio didn't want to leave the Patriots. The Patriots wanted to keep him. There was tampering charges filed, and Caserio's still with the New England Patriots. And so you have to wonder, is that the guy that he's wanted? And did he not hire a general manager because he wanted him, thinking he was going to get him this past offseason? He didn't get him, so Bill O'Brien said, I'll take over the duties with the maybe potential hope that he would still come. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Bill O'Brien's had a lot of success as the head coach of the Houston Texans. Notice I said head coach and not just a lot of success with the Houston Texans, because once he kind of took a more prominent role in that general manager type position, and even having an influence over those personnel decisions, they've made a lot of shocking, surprising trades. The first one was Laremy Tunsil. Not that they got Laremy Tunsil, because Laremy Tunsil was at the time one of the up-and-coming better offensive tackles, and they went after him hard, sending 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick for Tunsil and Kenny Stills. And you thought, okay, yes, they gave up a lot, but they have Deshaun Watson, who's a young, dynamic quarterback who gets hit a lot. The Houston Texans didn't have the best offensive line. Let's get Tunsil in there, and it's worth it. But, I wouldn't say Tunsil's lived up to it, and they mortgaged a lot of their future to get him. Then we had the Jadeveon Clowney. Jadeveon Clowney, former number 1 overall pick. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily he's been a tremendous player. I wouldn't say he's one of the most dominant pass rushers in the NFL, but he had success with the Texans. He was a cornerstone along with J.J. Watt and Whitney Mercilus as tremendous front 4, front 7 type defenders. And it seemed like Bill O'Brien and Clowney butted heads. And they franchised Clowney, but they botched that whole situation, because usually if you're going to trade a franchise tag player, you franchise them and then you trade him before the draft, you trade him before the start of the season, and they waited a while, and then his value dropped, and they only got a third-round pick, Barkevious Mingo, and Jacob Martin for Jadeveon Clowney in that trade with the Seattle Seahawks, who a lot of people, and myself included, thought that the Texans completely botched. Then you had this offseason. Out of the blue, because Bill O'Brien was butting heads with DeAndre Hopkins, didn't like the value of his contract in that, he trades away DeAndre Hopkins and a 4th-round pick to the Arizona Cardinals for running back David Johnson, a 2nd-round pick, and then a 2021 4th-round pick. So you trade away one of the top receivers in the NFL to the Arizona Cardinals for a running back who seems to be broken down and only a 2nd-round pick. And so we mentioned them getting potentially fleeced by the Seattle Seahawks, and then it was widely believed that the Texans just got fleeced by the Cardinals. You're giving up one of the premier receivers, a guy that's going to help Deshaun Watson continue to have success, and all you get in return is, a 2nd-round pick, but a broken down running back who so far this season hasn't really shown that he was worth that pick. But just wait. Now that they got DeAndre Hopkins, they traded him away. They also they needed a new receiver to come in. And so they went out and they traded a 2nd-round pick for Brandon Cooks. The same Brandon Cooks who the Los Angeles Rams couldn't wait to get rid of. It's not because he's not a great player. It's not because he's a bad person. It's just he had a huge contract and he really wasn't worth that amount of money anymore. But the Houston Texans not only took on that money that they thought DeAndre Hopkins was making too much of, but they give up a 2nd-round pick for him. So if you're looking at these 4 picks, these 4 trades that have kind of been made under the Bill O'Brien touch, have been 4 unanimously hated picks. And I shouldn't say hated, but 4 picks that most everyone says the Texans lost. And you're trading away 2 first-round picks. You're trading away a premier defensive player, a premier wide receiver, and once again a 2nd-round pick, a top 60 pick. Those are valuable picks in the NFL draft. So I want to say what went wrong, but I think I've already hit on them quite a bit. A biggest thing is Bill O'Brien is not getting along. He's not playing well with others. He didn't get along with Jadeveon Clowney. He didn't get along with DeAndre Hopkins. He didn't get along with former general manager Rick Smith. He continued to butt heads within the organization. Then you factor in the trade situations where they were on the bad end of those trades numerous times. And it all came to head with the team going 0-4, reports from Aaron Wilson of the Houston Chronicle that the team had stopped responding to him, and he ended up getting fired. Now, kind of the guy to kind of keep an eye on the situation is Jack Easterby, who is now in charge of football operations. He's a guy that came from the Patriots, so he had some ties with Bill O'Brien. He was actually brought in a few years back to kind of evaluate the organization, and one of the first things he did was the whole firing of Brian Gaine. It seemed like he was in lockstep with Bill O'Brien, that they had with these trades. But as I mentioned, things tended to, Bill O'Brien's temper, his detriment. I know there's reports out there that it was known for him when he fired guys, he'd tell them to get the F out and would do things like that. And it just seemed that O'Brien's temper and his just lack of playing well with others, getting along with others, compounded with this struggle of the season and losing the locker room, caused him to be fired. So, yes, he's been a successful head coach so far with the Houston Texans, but when you're the head coach, you're the play caller, and you're the general manager, and the team looks lost this year, and they look like they need a new direction, where else do you really go?